How's it going, everyone? She'sACats here, and today we're going to be looking at the dailies and weeklies available in Octopath Traveler Champions of the Continent, as well as taking a bit of a look at the Nameless Town, which pretty much everyone considers to be an element of dailies. I'll be taking you through the full daily process and hopefully answering any questions you might have along the way. Let's get started. First, let's briefly look at logging in. Just logging into the game every day will give you a baseline amount of ruby income, even without doing anything else. Every day, the Scholar Cat will send you a letter in the mailbox with 10 rubies attached. They also have some personality to them, so go ahead and give those letters a read as well while you're at it. On every 10th day, instead of receiving 10 rubies in the mail, you'll receive 30 instead, giving you an overall monthly income of around 360 rubies just by logging in and doing nothing else. As an additional bonus, on every 100th day, you'll receive 100 rubies in the mail instead. Next, let's talk about the dailies. Dailies reset at 9 AM UTC, so for you American players, that's 2 AM Pacific, 5 AM Eastern, and it'll be 1 and 4 AM once daylight savings time ends. I'm going to categorize the dailies into two groups, battle dailies and shop dailies. Battle dailies, as the name would imply, are dailies that have to do with battling. They're self-explanatory for the most part: win some fights and kill some enemies. One of the dailies that may take a bit of time to clear on your first day is killing one elite enemy, or symbol enemy as they're called in JP. Before you finish the first chapter of the story, the only available elite enemies are quite strong, and I wouldn't expect you to be able to defeat them until after clearing that chapter, going around and exploring a bit, and coming back to them later. However, after clearing the first chapter and gaining access to the other towns, the best elite enemy to kill for your daily is the Kate. There are 3 Kates that spawn in the wilderness around each of the 3 starting towns. They can be defeated extremely easily, and unlike Kates you would see in random encounters, they do not run away from battle. Defeating each Kate will yield 1000 EXP apiece, a great way to accelerate your way through the early game. Keep in mind the Kates respawn on a 20-hour timer, so if you come back the next day and don't see the Kate there, now you know why. Speaking of Kates, there's also a new daily that you can take advantage of on the EN version. By watching some quick ads, you can get a bonus encounter against Kates, as well as some free EXP nuts. From what I've been told, this resets every day at the daily reset, so definitely take advantage of this, especially in the early game, to get a nice boost. As you kill enemies to do your dailies, they'll drop loot, which brings us to the second category of dailies, shop dailies. These are basically the tasks that don't involve battle. Sell loot means you take the loot that you've gotten off killing enemies and sell it to the blacksmith at the shop. The loot you sell to him is then banked and can be used as materials to buy weapons and armor. The loot you get depends on the enemies you defeat, which in turn affects what weapons and armor you'll be able to purchase. After the sell loot dailies is successfully use one path action. In every shop you'll find an NPC off to the side that you can perform path actions on. Unlike the usual NPCs you'll find all over the various cities, the NPCs in the shops have items that reset after a certain amount of time has passed. This means you can come back to these NPCs every day right after you sell loot to the blacksmith, and then take their items and come back the next day and do it all over again. They were basically designed to be utilized for dailies. That being said, within your first several days of playing, you're probably going to be running around every city and using path actions on every single NPC you see, so this daily probably won't ever be a problem. The last daily on the list is to use the exchange one time. This is a function that you're probably not entirely familiar with due to its limited usability in the closed beta. The exchange is exactly as the name implies. You can exchange certain resources for other resources. If you don't know what you're doing and just want to do an exchange just to finish your dailies, stay tuned for a later part of the video where I go over the Nameless Town. Otherwise, if you really just want a super basic exchange option, I would recommend turning 60 bronze guidestones into 1 silver guidestone. Down the line, I plan on doing a more in-depth video on the exchange as well as class-up items since they are somewhat related, so stay tuned for that. Now you probably noticed I skipped one of the battle dailies. So what exactly is a hunt? Hunts are dungeons where you can go in, fight a bunch of elite enemies, and walk away with some loot, EXP, and most importantly, guidestones. Any character you bring into the hunt will get personal guidestones that can be used to increase their level cap. 5-star units get 5 guidestones apiece, 4-star units get 10, and 3-star units get 20. You don't have access to hunts until after clearing the first 3 storylines and gaining access to the city of Kragspear, but you shouldn't feel pressured to rush your way out of the early game. Just take your time and play at your own pace. You get 1 ticket to enter a hunt per day, which is perfect considering the daily calls for completing 1 dungeon. I plan on going a bit more in depth on hunts in a future video, so look out for that as well. Finally, you get a few extra rewards for finishing a certain number of dailies. Overall, the daily reward yield is 100 bronze guidestone shards, with an additional 30 if you add the hunt daily, 10 bronze guidestones, 5 rubies, and 20 memory fragments, which we'll come back to later. The main thing we care about here is, of course, the rubies, and if we go by 30 days per month on average, this has a monthly yield of 150 rubies per month, which when added to the rubies from the daily login bonuses, results in a cumulative monthly total of 510 rubies per month. Next up, we have the weeklies, which reset every Monday. Weeklies pretty much follow the same exact structure as dailies. Battle weeklies consisting of winning fights, killing enemies, and killing elite enemies, and shop weeklies consisting of selling loot and using path actions. Funnily enough, if you're being diligent about doing your dailies every day, most of your weeklies are basically all finished. The only ones you would need to do a bit of extra work for are win 50 fights and kill 10 elite enemies, which, if you're killing all 3 Kates every day, shouldn't be a problem either. The main reason we care about the weeklies is, once again, the rubies, of which we get 30 per week. With roughly 4 weeks per month, this adds another 120 rubies to our total, giving us a grand total of about 630 rubies per month. Obviously, exactly 4 weeks per month isn't the most accurate number, so if we look at the yearly yield, it results in 1,560 rubies from weeklies per year. Apart from the rubies, your weekly missions will also yield 110 silver shards, 10 silver guidestones, 50 gold shards, and 10 gold guidestones. The last thing I want to touch on in this video is the Nameless Town. The Nameless Town was explored a tiny bit in the closed beta, but will eventually grow much larger and will be an important part of your daily cycle in Octopath. But what is the Nameless Town exactly? Basically, it's a town that you grow from the ground up, adding new houses and townspeople that can serve various functions. Essentially, the Nameless Town will become a home base of sorts. At its most basic level, Nameless Town will have elite enemies that appear to the east of the town. These elites can be defeated for loot that is then used to build additional structures in the town itself. Granted, not all of the structures will be available immediately, and will probably be added steadily in future updates. Nevertheless, it's a good idea to stock up on the materials dropped by those elite enemies so that you can be ready to unlock the new stuff immediately when it comes out. Eventually, as more buildings get added to the town, you will also gain access to townspeople that you can interact with for completing path action dailies. Eventually, there will also be a shop where you can do your shop dailies. Nameless Town basically becomes your one-stop shop for everything you need to do in a single day, but for now, it'll just be another elite enemy or two to add to your daily rotation. The loot dropped by the elite enemies can also be exchanged for memory fragments if it's not needed for expansion anymore. You might remember memory fragments from earlier in the video, as it's one of the rewards that you get from dailies. Once you don't need the elite enemy's loot anymore, feel free to use the exchange to trade in that loot for memory fragments every day to complete your exchange daily. Memory fragments will eventually be used to purchase specific items needed for further Nameless Town expansion, but can also be traded in for things like single roll tokens, guide stones, and special weapons down the line. I'll be sure to keep you guys updated when this sort of stuff becomes relevant, of course. And that about does it for today's video. As always, I hope you all enjoyed and learned something from this video, but if you have any unanswered questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Up next will be the long-awaited 4-star character guide, so look out for that. This has been CheezyCats, and until next time, see ya!